Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast, specifically the final fifth pod of Christmas with ConstructConnect News Media Director Vince Versace. Vince, as per usual, welcome.
Hey, Warren, thank you so much. Great to be here again at the end of a year with you and our listeners to talk about all things construction that happened in 2023 and looking ahead to 2024.
You took my summary away from me, so why don't you start with that? What happened in 2023 that really struck you as important to the business and to our business?
Well, you know what I mean? I can't help but be a little facetious and kind of tongue-in-cheek. But Warren, did we see the establishing of Skynet? You know, as Gen Xers who have watched Terminator, you know what I mean? How often did you hear when it came to artificial intelligence this year?
Well,
you know what I mean? And its impact.
The best quote I've seen is, we expected it to be Hal, and instead it's some salesman who lies about everything, and that's basically what I never saw. Turned out Skynet's a sales guy.
That's true. That doesn't happen in the Terminator movies at all. Sarah Connor would have had a different role and mission back then for sure. You know, like take Salesforce offline and see what happens, right? I bring up AI. Like, I know you've talked to our other staff writers, you've talked to Lindsay, and there's all kinds of issues we've covered. I was fascinated a bit more on the tech side of things with the industry because AI really gained momentum as it concerned its applicability and its presence in construction. And I was curious to see through our writers, our staff writers, through yourself, through our freelancers, you know what I mean, what the state of the union, let's use that term, was when it came to the use of AI in construction. And not to confuse the two, ChatGPT kind of drove that conversation quite a bit at the beginning of the year, eh? Didn't you find?
It's not quite the same thing that we're talking about here,
it's not quite the same thing. And just recently, a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of hosting a session at the Building Show, the biggest construction trade show in Canada. And the panel, which we sponsored, ConstructConnect, on the main stage was about AI. What's the hype? You know, we had Doug Dockery, our chief technology officer, on that panel, and we had Arash Sahi, who I know quite well. He's the CEO and founder of ACO Innovation Lab, which, for full transparency, I'm on their board of experts of that. And we discussed for the audience AI. What is it? What is the hype? Really trying to break it down for folks, because as you know, we both have a lengthy career for what it's worth. Not trying to give away our age, but we've seen, you know, what happens in media, right? Catchphrases, little things get picked up, and people just want to drive and make sure they're covering something.
Pivot to video. But are they? For instance.
Yeah, pivot to video, right? But are they really giving the substance and the explanation of what the listeners or readers need? So, you know, our focus with our AI session was really for the construction personnel and stakeholders at the trade show to understand what it is. Because I know, like for us in media, we were trying to understand ChatGPT's influences. You know, is it a threat? Is it not? And we've had our own project we've been working on around the applicability of something like that as a tool for us, possibly. But AI, it's like, you know what? AI is here. There are certain elements of construction that are using it. So when I asked our two panelists, what's the AI story next year if we are to meet at the Building Show, again, Building Show 2024, they both said the story will be that it's not you asking this question. You know, it essentially was their answer, to paraphrase it, was the story will be that it isn't the story that AI is in construction. The story will be that a lot more people have experimented with it and understood that maybe it's not this big, scary thing. You know, what do you think?
Well, full transparency, that particular podcast episode, I used AI to not change the audio, but to sort of enhance it. In fact, it's called Adobe Enhance. It's a product of Adobe, you know, the guys that make Audition, which is what I used to edit it. You put audio through Adobe Enhance, it enhances the speech, and so that's how everything sounded a lot more clear than the original recording sounded, which is just kind of a factor of if you're in a crowd and in that kind of an audio environment. So, but you can now do this with AI. So that's one tool that is kind of invisible.
So you used AI to help enhance the audio on that particular panel. Like,
exactly,
we have a certain comfort zone being in media, working with new tools and new technology. It's inevitable, right? Evolve or die. Like we've had to do it with our publications, with this podcast. That's what we've done.
But at the same time, we go through the guideline of it has to be real. Like there's stuff like there's a thing called generative fill in Photoshop. But if we were to take like a picture of a construction site and then we can't add generative fill because it's fiction, right? Nothing, for instance, in the podcast is fiction. It's just enhancing the speech so you can hear what they said.
That's right. Exactly. Like, I mean, and that advancement's interesting because I've looked at it too, and it's just like there's so much danger with that type of tool. If it's not, and we see the dangers and perils of ChatGPT and AI on social media. The bad actors are going to be bad actors, whether it's just a really crappy tweet in 100 characters or 140, whatever the limit is, or creating something that's AI generated and trying to pass it off as real.
Disinformation. We're going to see it next year. I guarantee we will in 2024.
Exactly. To rile up the masses, right? Yeah, with the election in particular. God, that's
Absolutely, we will.
You know what I mean? We're going to see it. So what happens in our space? What happens in construction around stuff like that? Do we have to, I don't think we're at the stage where we got to worry about misinformation being generated by AI or misrepresentation, but it's just companies understanding, you know, and as our panelists told them, it's like play with some of the free tools so you feel a bit more comfortable with it. You know, there's interesting nuances that they were brought up by some of our attendees at that panel. Like some of it is the issue of the data, free data, open data to use in an AI tool to better enhance a construction process, whether it's takeoff, whether it's bidding or procurement, or, you know, like we heard that a lot. It's like use AI to help you with your bid documents, writing a bid or writing up a tender application. Like that's interesting. You know, be curious to hear from the industry what they do next year around that space. Do we see more of it? You know, we know in the procurement circles you're seeing a lot more AI applicability. But what also we hear, and you and I used to hear this too on the media side with new tools, it's like that expertise, that human intuitiveness in using the tool is what's missing sometimes with that AI and ChatGPT stuff. If it's
not conscious, it doesn't have experience. It's the stats package next to a spreadsheet, which can be useful for a lot of stuff, but it's not. It doesn't have intuition to begin with, or anything else like it. Like we're anthropomorphizing that onto it, so it's kind of our fault, frankly.
Yeah. So I find that interesting. You know what I mean? Is one of the stories of 2023 that I still think crosses over to 2024 when it comes to construction. What are we supposed to do in that space, right? So because we know there's other pressing issues that the industry still has. Lindsay and the staff writers and yourself have talked about it too. I'm curious to see what the business of construction looks like in 2024, because you have a lot of economists, some of our own, also saying the same thing. You see this kind of dichotomy of what's available, right? You have mega projects, like a lot of them kind of getting underway, in particularly in the U.S., because Biden's recent bill really put some money into infrastructure, right? But the other side, you see commercial and residential construction kind of tightening up a little bit. You got interest rates coming into play. Interest rates coming into play as we're still in a post-pandemic economy. You have an ongoing labor shortage that is here. The thing that you and I were writing about in our early days of being at the JOC and DCN, respectively, about the impending labor shortage, it's here. It's been 3 years we've been talking about it, that it's here. And the industry's still trying to find some solutions. There have been some innovative things. I'm curious to see where that goes, right? And you still have supply chain issues as well. There's still some stuff that are hard to source. You still have pricing in the system that's based on that price pinch, that supply chain price pinch, and material scarcity and inflation. Like those price points are still in there governing of the business of construction. So I'm not excited about negative pressures being on the industry, but what I am excited about is seeing how we can convey that intel next year through our papers and the podcast. You know what I mean? To kind of better arm the industry when it comes to those topics. You know, so you can expect to see something where we are hoping to kind of generate some kind of North American series that looks both at Canada and the U.S. when it comes to the business of construction. And we haven't framed it out yet, but it's just something for our listeners to remember. If they have an idea, if they want to participate somehow in it, by all means, reach out to you, reach out to us with an idea or a story idea or an angle that maybe we should make sure we consider in such a series when we look at the business of construction in 2024. How about you? You know what I mean? I know we've been talking about the podcast. We've mentioned the podcast, but we have plans for the podcast. So maybe our listeners kind of noticed. One of the things is we're going back. The podcast is still growing. We still won our accolades this year. Best Canadian construction podcast on the web. That's heard by FeedSpot. That's stated by FeedSpot. One of the top 5 construction podcasts in North America again. This is great. They're great feathers in our cap, but we're always looking to get better. We're always looking to innovate. And I think that's our challenge for 2024. What are your kind of thoughts on the pod?
Well, like people have noticed, we've kind of gone back to one on Friday instead of one on Wednesday and one on Friday. And I think it was good to have done that because it got us to sort of, for lack of a better term, a good assembly line to get everything done. But at the same time, I find personally it's a lot not easier but it's easier for me to put together something that's got a little more to it if it's got and it gives me more time to get more than one set of people sometimes, not always, but circumstances allowing, get more than one set of people on a podcast. Like say it's an architecture podcast, you have one set of people talking about this and one set of people talking about that, or it's that sort of thing. So it is, and also it doesn't mean we can't do specials, like say the budget or something else comes up that needs to be covered. We just put it out. There's no rules. The only people governing these rules is us. So we just decide what needs newsworthy and then what we can put on in a weekly cadence. But I just think the weekly cadence works because it's another routine for people too. So I've even found with some podcasts where I would subscribe to their Patreon and then I get inundated with a ton of stuff and I'd be like, I can't listen to all this, so I just wouldn't. And so there's a weird balance to strike, and it's just trying everything and seeing what works is what it boils down to. And I think for now that the Friday thing works better as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too because we've talked about it, you and I and Lindsay, Cole. Getting a bit more, I'm going to use the term live, but it doesn't mean like we're going to be, the podcast are going to be live, but more voice of the listener into that's active. That isn't just us reporting and calling somebody for an interview on the podcast. Actually having experts. Yeah. Not dual. We don't need fights on our pods, but people love panels. People like hearing countering points of view. And in a very fragmented territorial industry like construction, we have a lot of conflicting points of view on topics. And if we can share kind of those opposing views in pods more, and I'm hoping this, going back to our old format, will do that, I think we'll serve the industry better. Things were running fine at twice a week. It's just, it was different. The cadence was different. The news that we were reporting was different. And to your point, in a way, it was limiting how much, you know what I mean, we were kind of covering, right? Because you're one person, the staff writers can only do so much, right? So myself, Lindsay, can only step in on so many pods, right? But if we can get the voice of the listener in and more panel work and more discussions, hey man, you know what I mean? I think we're going to serve the industry well that way in 2024.
And just as a sneak preview, and people are probably tired of hearing this, but because of my other podcast, my Doctor Who one, we try stuff on there because there's very low risk and probably significant reward in doing it. So we've tried this new software. It's a live stream software. So you can put way more video components into it. So, we're going to be talking about it. I don't know what form it's going to take, but if we have a live stream that we record ourselves and we can add our own stuff on the fly, that means we can do a lot more stuff. In fact, you could you can interview some architects. You could actually show the architecture they're talking about, the renderings, that kind of thing. You can show stats if I'm talking to Alex, like from his latest stats pack, that kind of thing, right? So there is stuff you can do with this, even if it's not quote unquote live. It still lends itself to that. It makes it a lot easier for you to create that as opposed to slaving over a video for a week. You're making most of it as you go, which is how a lot of television has worked for literally almost a century. So
yeah, right. Well, I'm excited for it. It's been an interesting year. Yeah, I still feel like we're so post-pandemic and just understanding where the industry at, and just watching the industry try to understand where it's at. It doesn't matter which side of the border. We're still hearing some of the same similar issues, right? About like, do I have enough people to do work, to do this work? Is there enough material for it? How do I stage my proposing to bid on projects, right? Like it's much more nuanced now than it was before. We find anyways from our coverage and talking to people, right? So interesting to see where it takes us. But once again, I just wanted to thank all our listeners for another successful year with this podcast. Thank you once again for all your hard work, Warren, and making this happen, twice a week and now to the once a week. And as we look forward to what we're going to do with it, there's no point in doing this if we don't hear from folks. You know what I mean? And if they don't download us and they don't give us feedback. So what we hear from you all in the industry is that we're on the right track still. I say that every year. And I also appreciate when we do get the feedback that, maybe we missed the boat. Maybe we need to improve on something.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? We're always there for it. So with that, my friends, we wish you a happy holidays and our listeners a happy holidays. And I look forward to listening to the other pods in our series. I got to admit, I've known who you've been talking to in the other pods of Christmas, but I know what I'll be doing while I'm wrapping presents late at night. I'll be listening. Believe it or not, I'm going to listen to our podcast because that's just what I do.
All right. On that little scary note, happy holidays to everyone and happy 2024 upcoming in just a few days.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.